Hey guys, tonight we drift into one of those tales that's so ancient, so strangely slow-moving that you might wonder why you're still awake halfway through it. But that's kind of the point, isn't it? You're here because you want to fall asleep, while something calm and mildly ridiculous plays in your ears. So let's start with Helios, the Greek sun god, who, according to myth, literally drove a glowing chariot across the sky every single day. You'd think being responsible for sunrise and sunset would come with a little urgency, but no, tonight he's yawning, he's stretching, he's rubbing his celestial eyes, trying to remember if he left the kettle on in Olympus, and you get to ride shotgun.
So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I love seeing the global roll call. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on the edge of dawn. The horizon is still a bruise of purple and dark navy, and out of it with all the enthusiasm of someone clocking in for the world's longest double shift. Helios yawns. His mouth opens wider than a canyon, and the sound echoes like an organ warming up. The first rays of sun leak from his teeth, and you can't help thinking, maybe he should see a dentist. The golden chariot rolls out of the celestial stable, its wheels creaking like an ancient cart, badly in need of WD-40. 4 fiery horses snort sparks as they paw the ground, their manes flowing like molten lava. You'd expect drama trumpets and explosion of light. But tonight it's more of a sluggish shamble, the kind of morning where you hit snooze 3 times and still consider calling in sick. Below, the Aegean Sea glimmers faintly, and the whitewashed villages of Greece blink awake. A rooster crows, one of many who seem unaware that they're redundant, because Helios himself is technically the alarm clock. You trudge alongside your feet, barely grazing the dawn mist, watching him climb lazily into the chariot seat. He mutters something under his breath, probably a complaint about how Apollo always gets mistaken for him. Mainstream historians will tell you that Helios was the titan of the sun, son of Hyperion, and Theia, and brother to Selene the moon and Eos the dawn. Quirky detail in some traditions, Helios is basically the tattletale of Olympus. He's the one who spots Aphrodite cheating with Ares and runs straight to Hephaestus with the gossip. Imagine being the literal sun and still having time for daytime drama. The horses, named Pyrrhoa, Ios, Ethon, and Phlegon, stomp impatiently, though impatient for them means about the energy level of a lazy cat, who maybe possibly might get up to eat if you shake the treat bag enough. Sparks scatter, lighting up faint streaks of morning. You lean on the edge of the chariot, feeling the warmth seep slowly into your skin, and realize the journey across the heavens is not going to be a sprint. It's a crawl. Historians still argue whether Helios and Apollo were ever really the same god, whether later Greeks just merged them in a cosmic case of mistaken identity, or whether they remained separate figures who occasionally swapped jobs like interns. Either way, tonight's Helios looks in no hurry to prove his individuality. He scratches his golden beard, adjusts his radiant cloak, and waves vaguely at Eos, who's already painted the sky with rosy fingers, and is probably annoyed that her brother is once again late to work. You hover there, the world still wrapped in early quiet. A fishing boat pushes off from a sleepy harbour below. Somewhere a philosopher yawns into his scroll, pretending he's been awake since midnight, deep in thought. And Helios. He just sighs, flicks the reins half-heartedly and mutters, "Another day, another lap." And you lucky you get to float along, lulled by the world's slowest sunrise. The horses shift uneasily as the first thin streaks of light ripple across the horizon. You can almost hear their joints pop. Mythical or not even fire-breathing steeds need a morning stretch. Pyrrhoa tosses his headspark, spraying out like someone shaking a box of birthday candles, while Ios snorts so loud you wonder if Olympus should start marketing divine nose strips. Ethon paws the sky's edge, carving shallow grooves in the mist, and Phlegon just stands there, eyelids heavy, clearly regretting last night's extra serving of ambrosia oats. Helios, still blinking, pats them absent-mindedly. "Come on, lads," he grumbles, "let's make it look convincing." He's less a conquering god at this moment, and more like a dad trying to coax his kids into the car for a road trip they don't want to take. And yet, slowly, the team lines up, muscles glowing, their breath steaming in golden trails that dissolve into daylight. You find yourself floating alongside, watching from the side, as the gears of morning click into place. Down below, olive groves turn from shadow to silver green, and the sea blushes with that faint pink you only catch if you're awake too early. People stir. A fisherman in Rhodes pulls his nets, glancing up briefly, as if to check whether Helios, patron of his island, is on time. Spoiler, he's not. And here's a neat mainstream fact: the Colossus of Rhodes, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, was actually a giant statue of Helios himself. Imagine waking up every morning to a 100-foot bronze reminder that the sun god was watching you eat breakfast. The quirky part: some ancient sources claim people believed the statue straddled the harbor with ships sailing between its legs. Historians still argue whether that was ever even architecturally possible, or just a myth born of sailors exaggerating after a few too many cups of wine. Back in the sky, Helios adjusts his reins, muttering under his breath about how mortals never get his name right. Apollo, this Apollo, that he swears one day he's going to wear a t-shirt that says "I'm not Apollo." You chuckle softly at the thought, though you keep it to yourself. No sense offending the guy literally holding the steering wheel of the sun. The horses finally lurch forward, their hooves clanging like iron against invisible cobblestones. The sound echoes in your bones, steady and slow. Not a gallop, more like the sleepy shuffle of commuters at a train station. You drift closer, feeling the heat shimmer off their flanks, and notice something funny. Despite all the fire and glory, they smell faintly of hay. Apparently even divine steeds can't escape barn life. Below, life begins to bloom with that same hesitant rhythm. A shepherd yawns in the fields, leaning on his crook. A child stumbles out of a clay house, rubbing her eyes, squinting at the light, as if to say, "Really, this again?" Somewhere in Athens, a philosopher clears his throat to begin a lecture no one asked for, convinced the rising sun is proof of his latest theory. Meanwhile, Eos, the dawn, flits past, rolling her eyes at her brother's sluggishness. Her rosy fingers are already fading, the colors bleeding into daylight. She mutters just loud enough for you to catch. If he moved any slower, night would just turn back around. You decide it's probably best not to get involved in sibling drama among gods. Helios finally leans forward, pulling the reins with more conviction. The horses snort fire, the chariot creaks, and the sun lifts inch by inch. The world brightens reluctantly but surely, like a lamp slowly turned up in a dark room. And you, lazily adrift, caught between warmth and drowsiness, realize this is only the very beginning of an absurdly long day. The wheels groan as the chariot tilts upward, scraping against some invisible track carved into the sky. You brace yourself for acceleration, for the blazing rush of daylight, but no. It's more like a grocery cart with a stuck wheel, nudging forward in fits and sighs. Helios leans back, flicks the reins, then slumps again, as if hoping the horses will do most of the work. You float alongside, your feet dangling in the cool morning air. Below, rooftops begin to glimmer, terracotta tiles warming to orange temple columns, catching the first lick of sun, a lazy cat stretching across a stone wall as if it invented leisure. You drift over it all, lulled by the rhythm of the climb. Mainstream history slips into view like background music in ancient Greece. Helios wasn't just a poetic metaphor, he was a necessary figure. Farmers timed their sowing and harvesting by his arc. Sailors trusted his steady course to guide them on treacherous seas. Without him there would be no calendar, no rhythm to daily life. And yet here up close he's just a weary driver. He scratches behind one ear, yawns again, and mutters something about eternal obligations. You get the sense he'd trade places with anyone, even a mortal goat herder, just to have a day off. You imagine Helios calling in sick Apollo, scrambling to cover his shift, and mortals staring at a pitch-black noon sky. Not great for morale. One of the horses, Ethan, decides to veer slightly, drifting toward a cloud shaped suspiciously like a giant puff pastry. Helios tugs the reins, half-heartedly grumbling, "Not again." You realize quickly this isn't a flawless system. The world's most important daily routine is essentially being managed by a tired dad wrangling 4 cosmic toddlers. And yet the climb continues. Slowly the chariot crests higher, the light broadening, spilling over valleys and hilltops. You notice tiny flashes of ritual below, priests raising hands to the sun, villagers bowing, a farmer scattering grain in an offering. There's reverence here, but also necessity. Keep the sun happy or risk a bad harvest. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. Some ancients believed you could literally harness the sun's power through certain amulets or stones. Sun charms carried in pockets or sewn into tunics were thought to capture fragments of Helios's rays. Whether they worked is, let's say, doubtful, but imagine some poor guy holding up his necklace like a solar panel, waiting for divine Wi-Fi to charge his luck. Helios doesn't seem to notice. He leans on the edge of the chariot, gazing at the world below with mild disinterest, like someone stuck in traffic on their morning commute. You can almost hear him humming tunelessly, the cosmic equivalent of checking his phone at a red light. Historians still argue whether Helios had temples of his own in mainland Greece, or whether his worship was more confined to roads and scattered islands. Apollo, by contrast, hogged the spotlight with gleaming sanctuaries and oracles. And maybe that explains Helios's constant grumpiness. He's literally carrying the world's light, but his fan club barely shows up to the meetings. The climb slows again as the horses tire their fiery breath, scattering like sparks into the widening blue. You lean back, lulled by the heat, watching the slow-motion ballet of sunlight spilling over everything. And in that hazy drift you wonder, maybe this was always the point. The sun's rise isn't a race, it's a crawl, designed to give mortals time to wake, stretch, and stumble into their own routines. Helios yawns again, and you stifle your own. The journey is far from over, but the sky is already softening into full morning. Helios settles deeper into the chariot seat, reins slack in his hands, while the world below unfurls in full morning. The light now stretches farther, filling alleys, bouncing from whitewashed walls, and slipping into kitchens where bread bakes in clay ovens. Smoke curls lazily from rooftops, and the smell of grain and ash drifts upward, not that Helios notices. He's too busy mumbling to himself, eyes half closed, as if the climb so far has already worn him out. You drift just above him, a silent passenger, and look down. People are already falling into rituals, tiny acts meant to honor the sun. In Athens, a priestess pours wine onto the ground, her lips moving in a prayer to keep the crops healthy. On roads, a fisherman pauses before casting his net, raising a hand toward the brightening sky. Even in distant Egypt, where Ra technically owns the solar brand, a few worshippers turn their faces toward Helios, hedging their bets. A mainstream fact-mourning rituals tied to the sun were common across the ancient Mediterranean. Farmers would sometimes face east before planting seeds, hoping the light would bless the soil. Some Roman soldiers even whispered invocations to Sol Invictus before marching, convinced that the sun's invincibility could rub off on them. Imagine that trying to borrow toughness from a giant ball of fire. Meanwhile, Helios leans forward and sighs. "Mortals and their rituals," he mutters. "As if bowing makes me go faster." He scratches at the golden crown on his head, clearly more annoyed than flattered. You can't blame him. If millions of people depended on you but only offered a splash of wine or some barley, in return you'd be cranky too. The horses pick up slightly, hooves tapping against the air, in a rhythm you can almost hum along to. Their breath trails form smoky ribbons that blend with passing clouds. The chariot creaks, wobbling, then steadies again. Down below the city wakes louder now. Merchants unroll fabrics in the agora, voices rising in barter and complaint. Children chase each other through alleys, casting long shadows that flicker like dancing sprites. Somewhere, a lyre begins to play a tune, hesitant at first, then growing bolder as the light strengthens. It's not hard to imagine that same song drifting up to the ears of gods lost in the hum of daily life. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some ancients believed roosters weren't just natural alarm clocks, they were sacred messengers to the sun. Their crowing supposedly encouraged the dawn, like a pep talk to Helios himself. So next time you hear a rooster at 5 a.m., remember it might just think it's negotiating with a god. Helios doesn't look particularly motivated by paltry encouragement. He smirks faintly, tugging on the reins just enough to remind the horses they're still working. The golden wheels creak again, sparks falling from the rims like lazy fireworks. He shifts in his seat robes, glowing faintly, and mutters, "If they really wanted to honor me, they'd build better roads up here." Historians still argue whether Helios's worship ever rivaled that of Apollo, or if he was mostly a background figure acknowledged but rarely adored. Some say his rituals were absorbed into those of Apollo by the later classical period, blurring their identities until even scholars can't quite separate them. You picture Helios rolling his eyes at that muttering, "I'm literally driving the sun, and still I get second billing." The climb continues steady but not rushed. Shadows shrink, light spills across the sea, and you feel warmth press gently against your skin. Your eyelids grow heavier, lulled by the slow rhythm of hooves, the whisper of the rains, and the endless hum of a god's morning commute. The morning wears on, and with it Helios finds his voice. At first it's just low muttering, the kind of rambling that seeps out when someone's been awake longer than they'd like. But soon his words grow louder, directed not at you, but at the empty air, as though he can't resist the urge to narrate his grievances to the sky itself. You'd think he begins tugging half-heartedly on the reins, that being the literal sun would earn me some respect. But no. Apollo this, Apollo that. Mortals writing poetry songs, prayers, and half the time they forget my name entirely. He squints down at a temple where a priest raises a bowl of fruit in offering. And what is that? Grapes. Again, I can't even eat grapes. Do I look like I have a digestive system? You float beside him, resisting the urge to answer. Sometimes the best thing you can do for a god is just nod and let him vent. Below, life bustles. The agora fills with merchants shouting their prices, donkeys braying pottery, clinking together as buyers haggle. The clamour drifts up, mingling with Helios's commentary. He points toward a crowded square. See them all bustling about like ants, never looking up. They forget who makes their shadows. He snorts, his golden cloak shimmering faintly as if ruffled by irritation. Mainstream history moment. Helios was often invoked in oaths. Greeks swore by his name to prove their honesty, believing the all-seeing sun couldn't be fooled. Imagine standing in a court, raising your hand and saying, "May Helios roast me if I lie." It's both noble and mildly terrifying. Then comes the gossip. Helios straightens, a mischievous glint lighting his tired eyes. "I see everything from up here," he says, leaning closer, voice lowering, like someone about to spill a scandal. Aphrodite and Ares, oh, that was a scene. I was the first to spot them tangled up together, ran straight to Hephaestus. You should have seen the net he forged to catch them, pure genius. He chuckles, the sound vibrating like rolling thunder. Mortals think I only shine. They forget I also watch. A quirky tidbit: some accounts suggest Helios's all-seeing gaze made him a kind of divine witness, not just to affairs of the gods, but to human mischief too. There are stories of him noticing thieves, secret lovers, even conspiracies, like a celestial neighborhood busybody, except his ring doorbell camera covered the entire earth. The horses grunt, as if tired of his chatter, and Helios snaps the reins with more vigor. Sparks burst from their hooves, streaking across the sky. "I should start charging for the gossip I collect," he mutters. "Mortals would pay a fortune for it. But no, I'm stuck driving this endless route instead." Historians still argue whether Helios's role as an all-seeing god influenced later depictions of the eye of Providence, or if it was just coincidence. Either way, you can't help imagining his gaze stamped onto coins, temples, and murals, glaring down at mortals who probably just wanted a quiet moment to themselves. The chariot hums onward, squeaking like an ancient wheelbarrow. Helios slumps again, but his voice keeps flowing, half complaints, half juicy tidbits. the strange musings of a god who spends far too much time alone in the sky. And you're lulled by the rhythm of his words, drifting in the warmth caught between curiosity and drowsiness. The chariot inches higher, grinding against the invisible slope of the sky. By now the day feels well underway, though Helios still treats it like a chore he'd rather postpone. His eyes half close, his posture slouches, and his voice trails off into half-coherent mumbling. The horses, however, know the routine. They lean forward, flames flickering from their nostrils, hooves pounding the morning air in slow, deliberate beats. From up here, the world looks like a map unfolding. You see rooftops glowing like embers, seas scattering shards of silver light, and hills stretching away like folded blankets. Tiny figures scurry about their business, fishermen pulling nets, farmers steering oxen, women carrying amphorae of water balanced on their shoulders. The rhythm of daily life matches the rhythm of the climb, steady, unhurried, eternal. Helios stirs, glancing down. "Mortals never realize how close I am," he says, rubbing his golden beard. "Every rooftop, every alley, I see it all." He points vaguely with the reins. That one there building a temple, that one sneaking bread, and that one trying to write a poem so bad it should be illegal. He chuckles softly, though the sound is tired, like someone repeating a joke for the 1,000th time. Mainstream fact: by noon, the Greeks often associated Helios's chariot with its steepest climb, the hardest part of the journey. This mirrored their own workday, fields, trade, or battle, usually at full strain beneath the hottest sun. The god's climb became a metaphor for human effort, sweat, and perseverance. And yet Helios himself doesn't look particularly heroic at the moment. He slouches deeper, muttering about his sore back, tugging gently at the reins, as though each pull is more effort than it's worth. His crown tilts slightly crooked, slipping down toward one ear. You drift closer, noticing the chariot itself. It's golden, yes, but tarnished with scratches from centuries of travel. One wheel squeaks with every turn, while the other wobbles just enough to make you nervous. You picture the Olympian repair shop, some poor divine mechanic tasked with greasing the axles of a literal sun. Quirky tidbit. Some ancient scholars argued about whether Helios's horses breathed fire or light. Others described their manes as flowing with molten gold. One eccentric poet even suggested they sweated honey. You can't help picturing a horse dripping syrup, mid-flight mortals below, looking up in horror as sticky droplets rain down. Sweet, but impractical. The climb goes on, and the world below shifts into fuller brightness. You catch glimpses of temples, columns glowing white in the sun, statues standing tall, their marble skin warming under the rays. Smoke rises from sacrifice altars, mingling with the air, drifting upward in lazy spirals that almost brush the chariot. Helios doesn't bother to acknowledge them, though. Offerings, he sighs, all smoke, no flavor. Historians still argue whether Helios had dedicated priests, or if his worship was mostly a side note in larger rituals. Some evidence suggests small cults devoted to him dotted the islands, but his following never matched the grandeur of Zeus or Athena. You can sense his irritation in that, like a celebrity forced to play second fiddle while still doing the heavy lifting. The climb steadies. The horses grunt, the reins creak, and the chariot hums with slow momentum. You lean back, the heat pressing against your skin, eyelids heavy. The morning has matured, but Helios's journey is far from done. The sky blazes brighter now, though not in any hurry. Helios's chariot floats halfway across its daily track, balanced like a cart, wobbling up the crest of a hill. The heat thickens, spreading downward until the world below begins to shimmer. Roof tiles ripple like waves, sea horizons blur, and the fields of grain look as though they've caught fire without actually burning. You squint, but the haze only makes everything softer, dreamlike, perfect for drifting off. Helios squints too, tugging the reins as if to keep the horses awake. Midday, he grumbles, the part where mortals complain about the heat, but still ask me to keep shining. Can't win. He stretches one arm, the golden sleeve of his robe, catching the light like a mirror. For a moment he almost looks majestic. Then he yawns again, breaking the illusion. Below, life slows under the midday blaze. In Athens, markets buzz less urgently, merchants fanning themselves between haggles. Children run for shade playing hide-and-seek under porticos. Farmers pause in their work, wiping sweat from their brows, grateful for a fig tree's shadow. Somewhere, a scholar sits in a shaded courtyard, scratching notes about geometry while pretending not to nod off. Mainstream fact midday was sacred to many ancient cultures, the moment when the sun's power seemed absolute. Temples sometimes aligned to catch the noontime beam, a direct blessing from Helios's fiery path. Priests mark the shadow's shortest point as proof that time itself bowed to the sun. But here in the sky, time feels endless. The chariot creaks forward, hooves tapping steadily, the horses shimmering with heat. Sparks drip from their manes, vanishing into the glare. The sound of their breathing fills the air, rhythmic, heavy, almost like a lullaby, if you let yourself sink into it. A quirky tidbit: ancient athletes believed training at noon built strength because the sun infused their bodies with energy, which sounds noble until you imagine a sweaty group of runners collapsing midfield because Helios was in a particularly cranky mood and decided to scorch them just a little extra. Helios smirks faintly, perhaps overhearing your thought. Mortals always think I'm testing them, as if I care whether they can wrestle longer or throw a discus straighter. I just drive. His tone is flat, almost wistful. You sense the loneliness in it. Thousands of years spent circling the same track, seen by all, known by few. Historians still argue whether Helios was ever worshipped as a central deity in mainland Greece, or merely tolerated as part of daily cosmology. The truth likely lies somewhere between a necessary presence like water or wind, too obvious to ignore, yet too common to adore. The afternoon swells around you, heat shimmers, temples glow, and Helios leans lazily against the chariot's side, humming a tuneless melody that blends with the horse's steady clop. You let your eyes drift shut for a moment, the warmth settling into your bones, the endless march of midday carrying you along like a tide. The heat swells not angry, but heavy, like a thick blanket tossed over the world. You can feel it pressing down, slowing everything, even the air itself. The horses move as though through syrup, their fiery manes drooping, sparks falling lazily instead of snapping. Helios scratches his head, looking down at mortals baking below with a faint smirk. They'll blame me for the heat again, he says, almost proudly. But not one of them will stop leaving offerings. Can't complain too loudly if they still think I hold the thermostat. Below, the haze makes everything shimmer strangely. In a village courtyard, a healer lays out jars of herbs and odd concoctions, some meant to cool the body, others to invite the sun's blessing. You notice one clay pot filled with what looks suspiciously like crushed beetles mixed with oil. Supposedly it keeps sunburn away. You'd rather stick with modern sunscreen, thanks. Mainstream fact sun worship wasn't limited to Greece. The Romans elevated Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, especially in the later empire. Soldiers carried his image, emperors tied their reins to his invincibility, and December 25th, his festival day, later blended with Christian tradition. The sun's authority was universal, a clock and a god all in one. But for every mainstream ritual there were stranger ones. Some ancients believed drinking a cup of dew at dawn gave you a fragment of the sun's strength. Others swore that gazing at the sun briefly before quickly looking away, unless you like blindness, purified the mind. And then there's the bizarre tidbit from Egypt: certain priests smeared themselves with crocodile dung mixed with oil as a kind of sunscreen. Effective historians still argue whether that was practical protection or just religious pageantry. You shudder at the thought, but make a mental note: remember the crocodile dung sunscreen when modern SPF feels too expensive. Helios snorts. Mortals and their tricks. They'll swallow beetle oil, smear dung, even blind themselves, all for a sun that doesn't notice. I don't ask for any of it. I just show up. His voice has a note of weary pride, as if being inevitable is both his curse and his badge of honor. The chariot tilts slightly, wheels squeaking, hooves clanging louder as the horses pull through the thickening air. Sparks fall like slow rain, vanishing before they touch the earth. The sky feels stretched heavy with light. You drift closer, lulled by the drag of time. Historians still argue whether Helios's myth was influenced by older Near Eastern solar deities or whether he emerged independently within Greek imagination. The parallels are too strong to ignore. Ra in Egypt, Shamash in Mesopotamia, even Mithras in Persia, each a sun god, each a daily traveler. Maybe Helios is just one mask among many, or maybe he was always unique, grumbling in his golden seat, watching mortals smear strange ointments on their skin. You chuckle softly, remembering the rooster pep talks from earlier, and wonder if the horses would appreciate a pep talk too. They don't look like they'd listen. One stumbles, slightly regains balance, then flicks its tail of sparks with annoyance. Helios doesn't even flinch. He's used to the drag, the weight, the absurdities of mortals worshipping and misunderstanding him in equal measure. The day hums on thick with heat and odd beliefs while the chariot continues its stubborn crawl across the sky. The chariot steadies in the sky, golden wheels groaning with each turn, when Helios's eyes glaze a little. His grip on the reins loosens, and his lips curve in the faintest smile. You recognize the look. He's drifting into a daydream. His voice softens, and though he speaks as if to himself, you hear every word. Sometimes I think about the stories mortals tell, the names they mix up, the tales they pass along like broken pottery shards. He chuckles faintly. Apollo gets all the songs, the poetry, the statues. Me, I get confused with him as if we're one and the same. Drives me mad. Mainstream fact. In later Greek culture, Apollo absorbed much of Helios's identity, becoming associated with the sun alongside his usual domains of music and prophecy. By Roman times, many treated them as interchangeable, even though older myths kept them separate. Helios rubs his temples, sighing. Imagine being eternal only to be mistaken for your younger cousin. Apollo plays a lyre, and suddenly mortals forget who drags the sun itself across the heavens. He strums, eyes sweat. And yet he gets the temples. You almost laugh, though you're careful not to. This feels less like divine anger and more like the gripes of a tired co-worker watching someone else take the credit. The horses plod on hooves, sparking lazily. Sparks drift like fireflies into the air, fading before they touch the world below. The god leans back, letting the reins dangle, eyes lost in thought. Quirky tidbits and myths say Helios had children, lots of them. His daughters, the Heliades, supposedly wept amber tears when their brother Phaethon died, trying to drive the sun chariot. Imagine that your teenage son borrowing the cosmic car without permission and crashing it so badly Zeus had to intervene with a thunderbolt. If you've ever heard of a dad lecturing, "You're not ready for the keys," Helios was probably the divine prototype. He sighs again, softer now. And then there were the lovers. Mortals, nymphs, even that river nymph who claimed my reflection warmed her waters. Nice words, sure. But love fades when you're only seen at certain hours. No one likes a partner who disappears at nightfall. His voice trails off somewhere between wistful and sarcastic. Historians still argue whether Helios had a distinct cult of mythology around his love affairs, or whether later poets simply recycled the romantic tropes common to Apollo. Either way, the stories drift through the centuries, blurry as the shimmering haze you float through now. The horses grunt, tugging the chariot onward. Helios shakes himself from his reverie, blinking as though embarrassed you heard too much. He clears his throat and flicks the reins with a little more energy. The sun flares brighter, spilling light across the valleys below where children squint upward, laughing and shading their eyes. But you can't help thinking of his daydreams, tales of confusion, jealousy lovers, and a son who crashed his car. Even gods, it seems, need to vent about their family drama. The hours stretch, and the sky begins to shimmer with that heavy stillness of early afternoon. Helios shifts in his seat, adjusting the reins as the horses clop forward, sweat. if you can call molten sparks sweat dripping from their flanks. He looks down, and so do you. The world below has slowed. Villages doze in the heat, their streets quieter now. Farmers rest in the shadows of olive trees, sharing bread and watered wine. Children once racing through alleys now slump in doorways or lie on rooftops, tracing shapes in the dust with their fingers. It's as if the entire earth is napping beneath the sun's gaze. Helios raises an eyebrow. Mortals complain when it's cold, complain when it's hot. Yet here they are, stretched out like cats in the shade. Lazy, but at least they're predictable. His voice is tinged with amusement, the grumpiness from earlier replaced by something almost fond. Mainstream fact: ancient Greeks often scheduled their days around the sun. Markets opened at dawn peak. Trade happened by late morning, and by the hottest hours of afternoon, many retreated indoors. The Romans even had a word for it, meridiatio, essentially a midday siesta. The rhythm of daily life bent to Helios's slow crawl across the sky. You notice other patterns too. Soldiers drilling in a dusty field, their bronze armor glinting while their commander barks orders. A group of children chases each other's shadows, trying to step on them before they slip away. Somewhere in a courtyard, a woman hums while stirring a pot, her song floating upward like incense. Helios watches with a mixture of curiosity and boredom. "I see them all," he says. Every army pretending their battles matter. Every lover sneaking glances. Every philosopher scribbling thoughts that will be argued about for centuries. They live, they sleep, they wake, they worship, and still I drive. Quirky tidbit: in some rural areas, people believed sunbeams themselves were spirits. A sudden ray slipping through the clouds might be seen as a visitation, a blessing. If it touched you, a curse if it burned your crops. Children sometimes tried to catch beams with their hands, convinced they could hold a piece of the god. Helios chuckles almost fondly. "I've seen children play with shadows since the first dawn. They don't realize their little games are the truest worship. Not the sacrifices, not the prayers. Just laughter in the light. That's what keeps the world turning." Historians still argue whether Helios himself was ever depicted as a fatherly figure watching over mortals, or whether this softer image was a later invention by poets trying to humanize the vast, uncaring sun. You can't decide either way as you drift, the warmth wrapping around you, the sights below blurring into one drowsy haze. The horses clop on sparks falling lazily, while the world beneath continues its nap, cradled in the glow of an overworked god and his slow, squeaking chariot. The air thickens with the heavy drag of afternoon. Even in the heavens the pace feels slower now, the chariot rocking gently as if lulled by its own monotony. The horses' manes flicker dimmer, their fiery breath more smoke than flame, yet they keep moving step after deliberate step. Helios leans forward, elbows on knees, reins slack in his hands. "This is the part no one sings about," he mutters. "Morning poets love it. Sunrise hope, rosy-fingered dawn, blah blah. Sunset, that's when they get all sentimental. But afternoon forgotten. No hymns to the slouching hours, no statues to the slow droop of the sun." He smirks, then yawns so wide the sky itself seems to stretch. Below, shadows lengthen slightly, though not enough to relieve the heat. Villages hum at half speed. Merchants slump behind stalls, fanning themselves with broken bits of pottery. Farmers drag water skins out to thirsty fields, while stray dogs curl up under carts, chasing dreams in the dust. Even the sea looks sluggish, its waves flattening, its sparkles dulled by the oppressive blaze. Mainstream fact: the collapse of empires was often marked symbolically with imagery of a sinking sun. Poets described the decline of Athens and later of Rome as if daylight itself were fading civilizations bound to Helios's descent. Afternoon became a metaphor for fading glory, a reminder that even power droops eventually. But not all images were so solemn. A quirky tidbit: some ancient households believed pointing directly at the sun in the afternoon brought bad luck, as though Helios disliked being reminded he was tiring. Children were scolded for sticking out their fingers at the glowing orb. Better to look respectfully or not at all than to irritate the god when he was already cranky. Helios glances down at a group of soldiers drilling under the relentless sun. Their commander shouts louder, trying to keep them moving, but even the clang of bronze on bronze sounds muted, half-hearted. Mortals pretending they can conquer. Helios mutters, "Empires rise, empires fall, and still they march. They think glory lasts forever. They don't see it fades like the afternoon, bit by bit, shadow by shadow." Historians still argue whether Helios was consciously invoked in political rhetoric, if rulers aligned themselves with his eternal course, or if later writers simply imposed that symbolism. Either way, the metaphor fits empires burning bright, then slumping, then sinking. The horses grunt hooves, sparking less often now, their rhythm a slow, steady plod. The chariot tilts ever so slightly downward, though Helios doesn't comment on it. He just leans back, gaze wandering over temples, villages and fields, as if daring you to notice how everything below mirrors his own slow fade. The light softens fractionally, though the heat still clings. You feel your eyelids grow heavier, lulled by the god's weary commentary, the creak of golden wheels, and the eternal truth he embodies. Even gods can droop in the long stretch of afternoon. The afternoon drags on, and you feel it in your bones, the slow sag of time, the way every sound stretches. The horses' hooves clank rhythmically, less urgent, now sparks tumbling lazily into the air, before fading out like tired fireflies. Helios slouches in his seat, one hand dangling from the reins, eyes half-lidded. This is the part, he murmurs, where even gods start to wonder what the point is. You haul the sun every day, and no one sings about the sag in the middle. Everyone loves beginnings and endings, but no one wants to linger in the in-between. Below you notice the world mirroring him. Children have abandoned their shadow games, lying flat on rooftops with arms spread like starfish. Farmers rest under olive trees, their tools forgotten, their eyes closed. Even animals join the stillness, sheep tucked together in little knots of shade oxen kneeling in fields, cicadas buzzing like a sleepy choir. Mainstream fact. Aristotle once described the golden mean, the balance between extremes, the midpoint of virtue. Afternoon, in a way, was nature's golden mean, not the burst of dawn, not the decline of dusk, but the balancing act in between. For ancient philosophers, that stillness was a lesson, though Helios doesn't look like he's buying it. Quirky tidbit: certain ancient superstitions claimed that ghosts and spirits were most restless at midday, not midnight. Why? Because mortals themselves were weakest in the heat, making them easier prey for wandering shades. Imagine telling ghost stories under a blazing noon sun, less dramatic lighting, but apparently just as spooky. Helios exhales through his nose, a sound halfway between a sigh and a laugh. Ghosts at noon. Mortals really will invent anything to explain their naps. He tilts his head, studying the horizon, then flicks the reins gently. The horses grunt, tossing sparks, but keep their steady, reluctant pace. Historians still argue whether midday held special ritual significance for the Greeks, or whether most of its mystical reputation came from later Roman traditions. Temples certainly opened at dawn and closed at dusk, but what happened in the sagging middle hours is harder to pin down, maybe too ordinary to record, or maybe too sacred to define. The god scratches his beard. I see them down there snoring, sweating, dreaming, and they think I don't notice, but I do. I watch them drift, and I envy it. His tone softens, almost wistful. I'd like a nap myself. The sky feels thick with drowsiness, the kind that settles on your shoulders like a heavy blanket. The creak of the chariot wheels, the plodding rhythm of hooves, the constant golden haze, it all begins to lull you until even the voice of Helios sounds like a faraway hum. The sun drifts lower the long afternoon, bending imperceptibly toward evening, as if the world itself has surrendered to the pull of sleep. The chariot tilts lower now, so slowly you might miss it, if not for the lengthening shadows that spread across the fields below. The air loses some of its sharp glare. softening into a gold that clings to rooftops, hills, and temple columns. Helios straightens a little in his seat, almost reluctantly, as though realizing his shift is finally leaning toward its end. "You know," he says, voice calmer than before, "this is the only part mortals ever seem to notice. Sunset. They gasp, they point, they write poems." As if I wasn't here the whole time, dragging this light over their heads for hours. But fine. I'll take the applause, even if it comes late. Down below, villagers stir awake. Farmers stretch sore backs and gather tools. Children dash back into the streets, laughter bouncing through the alleys again. Women carry water jugs, their shadows long and thin on the ground, while shepherds guide their flocks toward pens. The day winds down, but in a way that feels alive again, everything bathed in the honey-colored glow that mortals never forget. Mainstream fact: in ancient Greece, the sunset often marked the beginning of festivals and rituals. Many celebrations, like the Panathenaic festival in Athens, timed processions to start in the evening, letting torches mingle with fading daylight. The transition wasn't just practical, it was sacred, the handoff from Helios to Nyx, night personified. Quirky tidbit. Some households believed the last rays of the sun could bless objects if you held them up at the right moment. A cup, a piece of bread, even a child lifted into the golden light was thought to carry luck through the night. Imagine explaining to your neighbors why you're holding your cat aloft at dusk, whispering a prayer to the sky. Helios notices the bustle, the way mortals perk up when his descent begins. "They see me now," he mutters. When the air is softer, when the light flatters them, when their poets wax sentimental. I should charge extra for sunsets. He almost laughs at his own joke, the corners of his mouth twitching. Historians still argue whether Helios was actively worshipped in daily sunset rituals, or whether his role was overshadowed by Hecate, Selene, or other deities who ruled the night. What's clear is that mortals rarely let the transition pass. Without meaning, it was always marked, even if only with a pause to look up and sigh. The horses seem to sense it too. Their steps quicken slightly, sparks falling brighter again, manes whipping with renewed motion. The chariot no longer groans but hums, like it knows the hardest part of the journey is almost over. Helios grips the reins with both hands again, squaring his shoulders. You drift with him, the golden wheels squeaking in rhythm with the heartbeat of dusk, the world below glowing as though wrapped in a painter's brushstroke. The sun slips lower, and suddenly you understand why mortals can't stop staring. It feels like a gift, this softened blaze, this farewell of the day. The wheels grind a little as the chariot dips further, golden rims glowing like coals against the dimming sky. The horses snort, tossing embers into the cooling air, their manes trailing ribbons of fire that curl into twilight. Helios shifts in his seat back straighter now, as if he knows this is the grand moment, his bow before the curtain falls. Below, the earth glows as if painted by an indulgent hand. Whitewashed houses shine with rose-colored edges, temples gleam as though dipped in bronze, and the sea reflects molten stripes of orange and crimson. Villagers pause, their work gazes fixed on the horizon. For all their complaints about the heat, this is when they forgive him, when the sun makes everything beautiful, if only for a short while. Finally, Helios mutters, "Recognition." You'd think mortals would clap, maybe toss me some olives for the trouble, but no, they just gape, then rush off to light torches and pretend night belongs to someone else. He shakes his head, though his tone is more amused than bitter. Mainstream fact: in many ancient cultures, sunset wasn't simply the end of the day, but the true start of the next. The Greeks measured time in daylight hours, but rituals often began at dusk, bridging the mortal and divine. Romans too saw the evening watch as a moment of transition, marked by horns and lamps lit across the city. Quirky tidbit. Some ancient sailors swore that whistling during sunset could summon fair winds, while others warned it would anger the gods and doom the voyage. Imagine being on the same ship, one sailor whistling for luck, while another tries to smack him. Quiet, both insisting their superstition is the right one. Helios steers the horses, lower the reins, glowing faintly in his hands. He glances at you, smirking. Historians still argue whether Apollo stole my thunder, or whether mortals just got lazy and lumped us together. Honestly, I don't mind anymore. Let them argue, I'm still here. Apollo strums his lyre, I light the world. Who really matters? The sky deepens, streaked with violet, and rose shadows pooling longer across the ground. Farmers drive their flocks home, merchants shutter stalls, children are called indoors. The chariot hums louder as the horses pick up speed, sensing rest at last. The horizon yawns open like a doorway glowing with the last fire of the day. The light softens into something tender, something final. Helios doesn't speak for a while, just drives, steadily, almost reverently, as mortals and gods alike bathe in the fleeting blaze of his descent. You ride with him, the warmth on your skin, the hum of wheels beneath you, the awareness that night presses at the edges. The sun lowers and you feel it, the inevitable hush before the day's last bow. The chariot dips low, its wheels skimming the horizon, sparks raining down into the sea. The horses snort heavily, nostrils steaming their fiery manes, dimming as though eager to shed the burden of daylight. Helios grips the reins tightly, leaning into the final descent. His face is calmer now, less sharp with fatigue, more serene, as if the act of closing the day gives him a peace he never finds in its endless middle. Below, the earth hushes. Villagers light lamps in doorways, the glow of oil flames twinkling like stars beginning to answer the sky. Fishermen haul in nets, their boats cutting dark lines across a molten sea. Families gather around hearths, their laughter softened by the air's cooling touch. Even the animals shift toward stillness, dogs curling in courtyards, birds settling in roof beams, cattle nudging one another into pens. Helios exhales deeply, the sound like a furnace sighing. "This is when mortals thank me," he says quietly. "A prayer at the threshold of night, a libation poured as if to bribe me back tomorrow. They don't realize I don't need bribes. I'll return whether they beg or curse me." He chuckles faintly, reins glowing as his chariot sinks toward the western rim. Mainstream fact for the Greeks: the sun did not set so much as travel beneath the earth, crossing Oceanus to emerge again at dawn. Helios's nightly journey through the underworld was part of the eternal cycle. His rest was not sleep, but a hidden voyage across the unseen. Quirky tidbit? Some ancient fishermen believed that if you shouted the name of someone you missed into the sunset waves, Helios would carry the message across the sea during the night. The logic: if he could haul light, surely he could haul words. Whether he listened, who knows, but sailors swore it worked, or it. Historians still argue whether sunset was considered Helios's moment of weakness or triumph. Was he a god exhausted by labor finally slipping into the underworld, or was he a victorious hero completing the hardest task in mythology day after day without fail? The horizon glows like a door edged with fire, and the chariot plunges toward it. The horses' hooves beat faster embers, scattering their bodies, shimmering as if ready to dissolve. Helios rises slightly in his seat, straight-backed eyes fixed on the edge of the world. "Another day delivered," he murmurs. "Another circuit done." The wheels groan once more, then vanish into the fiery rim, taking light with them. The world below dims into blues and silvers, lamps flickering to replace the vanished blaze. Night spills softly, wrapping earth and sky alike. You drift with it, lulled by the god's weary triumph, the hush of villages, the cooling air. The endless journey pauses only to begin again at dawn. But for now, there is rest. The chariot has slipped beneath the horizon, and the fire of the day is gone. What remains is softness, the hush of twilight stretching into night, a blanket spread across sky and earth alike. You feel it settling over you slower and slower, each sound fading into gentler tones. The horses at last rest in darkness, their sparks cooled into embers. The wheels no longer grind, but you can still imagine the faint echo carrying through the underworld seas where Helios drifts unseen. Tomorrow will come as it always does, but for now the world breathes in a rhythm meant for sleep. Your own breath joins that rhythm, steady and unhurried. The glow of lamps flickers behind your eyelids, warm and safe. The voices of villagers fade to whispers, then to silence. The sea lies still, reflecting stars like jewels on velvet. Every detail softens, lengthens, blurs into the calm of night. You rest in the quiet space Helios has left behind, carried not by fire and sparks, but by silence and shadow. The cycle is complete, the labor done, the story paused until morning. And you, floating here, wrapped in the hush of dusk, can finally let go. Let your thoughts wander, let your eyes grow heavy, let the journey of the sun carry you into sleep. Because just as surely as Helios returns each dawn, rest always follows the long drag of the day. So breathe, sink deeper, and let the darkness hold you gently. The world is turning quietly, steadily, without your help. For tonight, you are free to drift. Good night.